So, like years ago in high school, I bought this Chiaki Nanami cosplay because she was my favorite character in what at the time was my absolute favorite video game of all time, Super Danganronpa 2. And then I proceeded to never wear the cosplay. But I went home for Thanksgiving and I saw this in my closet and I thought to myself, well, I had a too long running bit in a video that wasn't really connected to Danganronpa, so why not continue the gag here? I do have a need to let everyone know that I recognize Danganronpa as cringe, but I've committed to the bit and I really want to justify this purchase from like 10 years ago. So, here we are. Hi guys! Hope everyone is well and has been eagerly awaiting this video as much as I am eagerly awaiting the end of Funky 2025. New Benoit Blanc movie, and I'm assuming you have too if you're on this video. Um, great movie, absolutely loved it. Fascinating story, lots of interesting characters, perhaps some of the most fascinating characters of the series, even. If you've seen my prediction video, you know I didn't get it right. I got some bits and bobs correct, but the overall, like, whodunit aspect, I didn't get right. There's still some stuff I want to talk about, especially I've had, like, a couple weeks to marinate on things, so let's get into it. Another one of the reasons I like the Benoit Blanc movies is that there's such a good case study in the murder mystery genre itself, and not only how to play with it, but also how to interrogate other themes as well. I kind of said that the last time, but I'm going to try and talk more about it this go around. So, in terms of my predictions, I was on some kind of right track. Basically, my major points were that Josh O'Connor was the main villain, Josh Brolin faked his death, McCormack was going to be the actual victim, and that money/greed was going to be a major factor in the death. In addition, I said that Glenn Close was going to play a bigger role than we thought, Jeremy Renner would have something to do with the faking of the death, and Thomas Hayden Church was either going to be a red herring or end up totally involved. And, like, I wasn't entirely off. I mean, I was basically wrong on most accounts, but the ideas of Josh O'Connor being a villain and Josh Brolin faking his death were referenced as a plot point, even if those ended up being red herrings. Thomas Hayden Church was totally involved, money was a big factor, and Glenn Close did have a bigger role to play. The biggest role, in fact. The role of the killer. And Jeremy Renner was a part of faking the death, he was just playing for a different team. I stand by what I said though in the first video. It's all about messing with your first perception. I thought I outsmarted the first perception, but it turns out my perception of the perception that I was having was wrong. But most importantly, I was right in that Jeffrey Wright did serve. He was only in the movie for 5 minutes, but he served for every second of those 5 minutes. In retrospect, of course, it seems obvious. I thought the trailer was giving us a double fake out, as in the trailer is positing O'Connor as innocent, so we think the first level twist is that he's actually guilty. So then the twist on top of that is that he's actually innocent, which made me think that there was a third level twist and he was guilty after all. But nope, it was just level 2. The levels don't indicate a level of quality though, it just indicates how deep a twist might go. It's like chess and how far you have to predict what your opponent is going to do and then what you have to do in order to outmaneuver them. At any given moment, what do you want the audience to assume, and how does that compare and contrast with the truth? How many turns can you throw at the audience before they get discouraged and frustrated and give up on even trying to solve the mystery? You don't want to take it too far and throw so much at the viewer that they just are convinced that they'll never figure out the mystery and give up. But you want a couple of twists just so you keep them guessing. For example, in Knives Out, the assumption is Chris Evans' character is an asshole, so the first level twist is him surprisingly rescuing Ana de Armas from his family. So then the audience is led to assume that he's actually the most decent member of the family and he's the one good person that wants to help the protagonist. Which also on a meta level, it's taking advantage of the audience knowing his major role at the time as the most heroic character ever, Captain America. But then we as the audience don't expect any more surprises with his character, so then we're shocked to learn that no, he's just as bad, if not worse, than the rest of the family and is the actual killer after all. So that's our level 2 twist. And then there's like a separate twist happening of Ana de Armas. Like, we think she's the killer, but then she's trying not to get caught, and then it turns out she's not the killer after all. And that's just entirely separate. It's just like the levels of a 7-layered dip. If you ever want to be a mystery writer, I don't think you have to follow the Benoit Blanc model exactly, or at all even, but I do think a good writing exercise is to rewatch any of those films and make 2 timelines. What the audience is led to think in a scene if they were accepting everything on screen as the truth, even if it wasn't, and then what the actual truth of the scene is, just to see how perception can be played with. When the police chief is explaining how the murder worked, the audience is seeing Josh O'Connor fake Brolin's death and then distract everyone so he can kill him for realsies. So our assumption is that Josh O'Connor is the killer, when the truth is that is what happened, but it was Jeremy Renner's character who was the one to distract and kill. And then Jeremy Renner ends up not even being the final culprit. I imagine Rian Johnson thought of people like myself thinking of the level 3 twist and thus sticking to the level 2 twist, because it both throws people who are on level 1 but also people who are on level 3 off. I'm talking this out loud, and does this make any sense? It does to me. Basically, he's just like drawing a list of what every assumption everyone's gonna make and chose the one that would potentially throw the most people off. That's probably not his like end goal, is how many people can I throw off, but you know, I think he does at least consider it. I'm a complexity nut. The more things something's got going on, the more I end up enjoying it. If there's not 50 things to focus on in a movie at any given time, then my intrusive thoughts start to wander, and that's bad. So instead I end up trying to distract myself with solving little puzzles. Don't have to face your demons when calculating how Jeffrey Wright could still save the day. Going back to Wake Up Dead Man, I realized that the faking of the Monsignor death plot point I mentioned earlier was almost too obvious in the movie itself, because they name the like cemetery grave thing the Lazarus door, which is like a blatant neon sign of, hey, look here, Lazarus resurrects in the Bible, so it's totes gonna happen here. It's symbolism, guys. And they also did show an autopsy of the Monsignor's corpse, so I didn't think it was possible, but I didn't end up thinking all the way ahead to 3 of the suspects were going to fake his resurrection plotline. I did also kind of figure that Josh O'Connor wasn't going to be the murderer, in fact, when watching, because there was a fake out of Benoit asking him, why'd you do it? And it's set up to look like he killed Brolin, but then it turns out he was referencing hiding the flask, so that fake out happened. But then there was a second fake out of Mila Kunis, the police chief, accusing Benoit of trying to hide O'Connor's guilt, and then that cast some of its own doubts. Can I do Benoit's accent? Probably not. I'm really bad at accents. Why'd you do it? Whoops, Jesus Christ. Sorry, guys. I don't know what that was either. It's fun to get things wrong in a mystery movie, because then you don't see it coming. It's not only a game of chess, it's a game of misdirecting and, being along for a roller coaster ride. Misdirection is a common theme in the Benoit Blanc movies. A good micro example is Benoit with the photo in the bar where he's like flipping it and comparing the before and after. O'Connor makes us believe that Benoit was looking at the bag in the photo, but then the later reveal shows that he's actually looking at the second wolf head on the lamp, which ends up being the real murder weapon. It's the whole thing of like the exercise with the audience assumption and the actual reality. In addition, a common twist of like murder mysteries at large is the culprit being the person with the least narrative importance to the story. Kind of sort of an evolution of the butler did it trope. It's not that it's like the most obvious or least obvious candidate, or that it's like just someone completely random that you've like was mentioned once. It's more an issue of a narratively important character who is part of the cast but maybe hasn't had a big moment yet. If you've ever seen a character in a murder mystery and thought, there's an unusual amount of focus on this character and it doesn't really affect the plot, so why are they here? There's a high chance that they're involved. That's kind of sort of how the obvious factor plays into it. And that's another way Rian Johnson does misdirection. Another reason to assume Chris Evans' character in Knives Out isn't the killer is because he's already doing so much in the story. So we think, oh, he wouldn't be this prominent if he was the killer. So then the assumption becomes like some other side character did it because otherwise they don't play that much of a role. When in reality, they're never intended to play a big role. They might just be there as like another suspect or as comic relief. Playing into that, the concept of roles also determines narrative importance. It's true in a lot of creative works, but in the mystery genre, roles are so highly defined and very important. Not as in every character is just reduced to the role they have to serve, but that every character is included to serve a role. If a movie was realistic and actually included every single person we interact with on a daily basis, and also what we know of their real emotions and life stories, it would be a never ending movie. And in a murder mystery, that's especially bad. You don't want to focus on like Jimmy the milkman's story with his kids, even if it's sweet, because it doesn't have anything to do with how, this one dude died. So in Wake Up Dead Man, this is how I was able to get some of the details right because I was looking at the roles. Once I made the assumption that money would be important and the death would be played, I had to think of what roles would be needed to help highlight those plot points. Well, we happen to have a lawyer who could read a will and a doctor who could fake a death. Wouldn't it make sense for them to contribute to that? If no one needed to fake a death, then Jeremy Renner's character could have been like a personal chef or something. And then on the other side of things, the Monsignor had to have a right hand person. It would be strange for him to have all this power without someone helping him. So that's where Glenn Close's character comes in. And then when Glenn Close's character had to have something backfire in her plan, it would be the idea of someone being close to her getting murdered. So then we create this circumspect housekeeper as her love interest and someone who ends up dead because of her. But Glenn Close. She's in her I do whatever I want era, and I support that so much for her. There's also a matter of roles playing thematic importance, which covers some of the other characters too. That's kind of where Kaylee Spaney comes into the whole thing. There's a trope in media about the miracle cure that God can fix anything if you pray hard enough. I'm not in that community, so I can't really speak on if it was an effective use or not, but I can at least look at the intentions and say that Kaylee is meant to be one of the more sympathetic characters in showing how religion can be corrupted and manipulative.
Whereas Andrew Scott's character had kind of a different role in the story.
He's mostly meant to be like comedic and a comic relief role and show how even famous people who didn't grow up in this town could get manipulated. As a whole, Wake Up Dead Man itself is about the power of narrative and of multiple perceptions and all that stuff. Josh Brolin uses religion to create a narrative of us versus them that upholds himself as superior, much in the way that McCormack uses politics to try and gain a following. Josh O'Connor himself has a narrative of religion that accepts and heals everyone as it has himself, while Benoit Blanc views religion as a story that ostracized himself from his mother, assumably. And then even in the end, Benoit Blanc gets swept up in his own fervor of narrative, and he's pursuing this idea of truth and indulging in this idea of a grand story and a grand unmasking, up until he has his Damascus moment and realizes that Glenn Close deserves a chance to confess herself. Side note, I didn't realize this until my second rewatch, but there's a moment where McCormack makes it very explicitly clear to Benoit that he's filming him about to embarrass himself by admitting that he can't solve this case. And Benoit, despite knowing that he actually can solve this case and can keep his dignity, shows compassion for the culprit and lets Dylan film this. Compare that with the Monsignor, who, when presented with an option of continuing his hateful rants for the world to see, or retire quietly and perhaps with some more dignity, he ends up choosing the former, and that ends up causing his death. That's pure contrast. And Glenn Close herself, she is at once a master and a victim to the power of storytelling. When she grew up, the Reverend James Faulkner weaponizes religion to feed her these misogynistic lies of how things should be, of how the woman Grace, the harlot whore, only cared for the inheritance. And, Glenn Close's character takes that and buys into this narrative without a second thought. And she helps mock Grace and lets the Monsignor take charge of the church and spew more hatred and alienate more people. Side note number 2, even when she does choose to kill, it's not because of money. It's to preserve this narrative that the Monsignor is good and powerful and not greedy. The whole damn faking a resurrection moment was to create this narrative that the Monsignor was a second Jesus, and it could have worked if Jeremy Renner didn't decide to be a little silly and kill her husband for the money. Glenn Close's character is the most sympathetic murderer we've had yet. Her motivations for the murder are still kind of fucked, but we have seen a woman who has been surrounded by men her whole life who have fed her nothing but hatred and anger and brimstone against those who don't side with her. While growing up, the one woman she could have talked to was Grace, but since Grace was vilified the moment she got there and never had a chance to defend herself, they never had that chance to make that connection. So now, in trying to preserve these lies and this hatred, Glenn Close ends up causing the death of one of the only good men in her life, her husband. And then the other good man is Josh O'Connor, but he's, like Grace, has also been vilified up until the moment of Close's death, where she realizes what a good priest he is, and also what a poor girl Grace has been and how she's been treated all along. All this to say, there is one more prediction I got right. A woman might have been the murderer this time, but the Benoit Blanc staple holds true. Men are still the main villain. I just happened to pick the one man who was a good person in this movie. It's actually a major theme in Wake Up Dead Man of how misogyny can affect anyone and everyone. The men in this town turn into monsters because of this toxic masculinity that they uphold that centers in protecting themselves and casting out anyone who might be remotely different, and then the women end up being hurt because of it. Jeremy Renner's character is a great echo of what happened with the Reverend and Grace. His desperation to get his wife back while also calling her a harpy mirrors the relationship that the Reverend and Grace had and his branding of her as a harlot whore. And then also, Kerry Washington has been forced to put her life on hold by her father to take care of a child that should have been the Monsignor's responsibility, and it is a child who ended up growing into a hateful man. Andrew Scott's novels, because of his turn to religion and casting out anyone who might have been his fans originally, it attracts a crowd of his worst nightmare, paranoid men who dress like the Big Lebowski. And that's an audience he explicitly doesn't want. You can see it in others too. Josh O'Connor had this aggression in him, this repression of feelings that led him to murdering somebody in the boxing ring. But you see him grow from it and turn away from it, and he ends up choosing kindness, which is a slay for him. Not all men indeed. Congrats, boys. You get Benoit Blanc and Josh O'Connor as good men. So you have 2 of them now. For more fun, we can even count Jeffrey Wright and that one guy in the bar, because he seems pretty chill. This is the real message of the film. Men are evil, unless if you're a Meow Meow Boy. If you don't take anything else away from this, I want you to take that away. Anyways, this was supposed to be a comedy video, and then it kind of became an impassioned college essay that went sideways every now and then. I did try to keep the Danganronpa references to a minimum, so you're welcome for that. It's everything to me feels so clear in a Benoit Blanc movie, like the themes and the characters and all the moving parts, especially when I watch it after. And that's really satisfying for me personally. Media doesn't have to be thematically clear or satisfying to be good, but that's just the kind of thing that really works for me. And I mean, not that it's a perfect movie. I know there's plot holes in all of the Benoit Blanc movies, and I'm sure there's stuff that muddy them so much that somebody else is gonna think they're stupid or overrated, which is fair. It's your opinion, man. Like I said before, if you want to be a mystery writer, even if you don't love these movies, I don't think you have to copy them, but I do think it's worth just like watching them and taking them apart because they are so inspired by the mystery genre and work through it in such an interesting way that I think you could really learn a lot from them. That's a wrap on this. I still have no idea what I'm gonna cover for January, what topic. If you want, you can leave suggestions in the comments. Just don't be offended if I don't take any. Like, I don't know when something feels right to me. It's gonna come to me in the middle of the grocery aisle when I'm, comparing blueberries, trying to decide which are the most perfect and won't, like, expire the soonest, which is also one of my favorite pastimes. I'm really a master of perception at that. You might even call me the ultimate detective.